Right.
Story. So once there was a person, and he said that he did Torah and the commandments, but it just didn't do anything for him, so he left. Doesn't do the Torah and the commandments anymore. That's what he said to the rabbi. So the rabbi said to him, I want to tell you a example, a proverb. He said, once there was a man, a poor man. He lived in the city of Minsk, and he worked at this very menial job, a Jew, menial job, and earned just enough, from, let's say, from hand to mouth. And he and his wife, they lived in this, very poor section of the town. Anyway, one day he was walking home from his work. He decided he would walk down the street where the rich people sit in the restaurants. And so he walked down the street, and he looked in one of the windows of one of these restaurants, and he saw these people all sitting and laughing, and with bibs under their and laughing at jokes, whatever they're saying. And he saw one fellow, sort of a corpulent fellow, and sitting at a table with a bib and a knife and a fork, and they brought in blintzes, steaming blintzes. And he had this big smile on his face, and he cut the blintz and he put it in his mouth. He ate it and he wiped his mouth off, and he was smiling, was happy. Blintz. Now, what is blintzes? Blintzes are, it's thin dough, what do they call it, crepe or whatever, and it's a thin dough. And inside of that, you can put all sorts of stuff. Blintzes. So there's potato blintzes, and there's cottage cheese blintzes, and there's the meat blintzes. You got all sorts of different birds. So he looks and he sees this man. He's just hypnotized at this sight that he sees of this man, cutting into and chomping down on these blintzes, the bib around his neck, and just with enjoyment, total enjoyment, and once in a while hearing a joke from somebody, haha, and laughing. And so he goes home to his wife, and his wife says, how was today at work? Very nice. He said, listen, Sarah, I want you to make me blintzes. So she says, okay, all right, Zalman, I'll make you blintzes. Said, oh, you're such a good wife. So she takes down the cookbook, and she says, okay, you have to have flour and water. She takes flour and water, makes dough, and she puts it in the frying pan, and she makes the dough, the thin layer of dough. And she calls over to her husband, Zalman. Meanwhile, her husband is sitting at the table. He's got a bib. He put a piece of the napkin under his this, and he's sitting with the knife and a fork, just like that guy did in the restaurant. And she says, Zalman, listen, we got a problem over here. What's the problem? She said, it says in order to make blintzes, these are cream cheese blintzes, as you have to have sugar. And I just got a little bit of sugar. We don't really have enough brown sugar. It says brown sugar. We don't have any brown sugar. So he says, so make it without brown sugar. You have other sugar? He says, we don't have any sugar. It doesn't make it without sugar. It says here, it says also you have to have honey and raisins. He says, listen, you made it without brown sugar. So, forget the honey and forget the raisins also. He says, but it says over here, one second, you have to have cream cheese. We don't have any cream cheese either. He says, okay, so you know what? You did without the honey, without the raisins. Do it without the cream cheese. As long as you don't put any cheese. He says, oh, you're such a good husband. So she takes the thing and folds it over. And like it says over there, what you're supposed to do. And there's nothing inside it. He folds it over and she puts it in front of him, royally presents it to him, puts it on his plate. He's got two of these blintzes in front of him, and he sits and he makes a blessing, Braymin Mizonot, and he eats, and he turns it and he swallows it. He turns to his wife. He says, Sora, I don't understand. What are these rich people? What do they see in these blintzes? Well, how can they enjoy these blintzes? What's the big deal? And he didn't put anything inside of it. So there's got nothing inside, only the outside. So there's nothing to be enjoyable. There's nothing enjoyable. So he says, so I don't see, what are the rich people so crazy about these blintzes for? There's just no taste. It's the same thing with Torah and the commandments. If you think the Torah and the commandments don't come from God, it's just rituals. So it's like an empty blintz. So it has no pleasure in it whatsoever. And because I told you that story, so it really is not. I mean, it's a nice story, but I'll tell you another story which is even better. Rabbi Levi, similar. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev was a very emotional person, and because of that, they wouldn't invite him to the meetings of all the big rabbis if it was long, because he would just get too emotional. When they were praying, he would start to yell and scream, and he would do. So they told him not to come. So there was a big meeting of all the great rabbis, and he really, really wanted to come, wanted to be there. And he went and asked if they would, and he promised. They said, listen, we're not going to invite you because you start yelling and screaming, and you just go, you're just oblivious to everyone around you, and you're screaming about loving God. I mean, we also love God, but we're not, you have to control yourself. So he said, okay, I promise. I promise I will control myself in all the prayers. I will not yell. I will not scream. I will not interrupt. I promise I will do it. And as soon as I do, you can put me out. I said, okay, good. So they put like a couple of special people on it to watch him all the time. And sure enough, he came to this meeting of rabbis. It was a holy thing, just holiness radiated everywhere. Great, beautiful faces, shining, holy rabbis with it. And they all, they started the evening off and they prayed the evening prayer. And he prayed, he was quiet, he held himself. And then after they prayed the evening prayer, he was quiet, he held himself down. Then they all sat with a big meal, and he ate the meal. He was quiet, he didn't say anything, read the blessings after, and they spoke, they said words of Torah. They asked him to say a word of Torah, and he also said, it was very good, he was controlling himself. So it was also in the morning. In the morning prayers, which are longer, and there's much more to think about. Nevertheless, he held himself, and he was quiet, and he didn't, because he wanted to hear what these other rabbis said, and he wanted to also be around them. Came the morning meal after they finished, and they brought what was it called? Not blintzes. There's another word for it. The kreplach. They brought kreplach, and the kreplach could be filled. They had different types of kreplach. They're filled with meat, and they filled with the onions, filled with this. And the waiters came around to all these rabbis and said, which do you want? Which do you want? Now in Yiddish, there's no word for like. What do you like? The word is the same. For was has du lib. What do you love? That's the word, right? And you know it when you say was has du lib. What do you want? It means which one do you want? It's just the same word for the same. So they came to him and they said, which type of blintzes, that's what it was, blintzes, I think. Blintzes, was it, or kreplach? Which type of kreplach do you want? Which type do you want? But how do you say it in Yiddish? Which do you love? Which do you love? For was has to live? What do you love? Do you love this type? Do you love this type? He said, what do I love? He said, what do I love? He said, I love Hashem. I love God. That's what I love. And he stood up on the table and says, I love Hashem. Hashem. And they had to take him out. He couldn't control himself. When they asked him, what do you love? So in other words, the inside of Judaism has to be filled with love. That's the inside of the blintzes, and that's what makes Judaism interesting. And is what Mashiach is going to bring to the whole entire world, this love. The world is going to be a filled up blintz of godliness. Have a good day with Mashiach. And I'll see you all tomorrow.
Thank you.